Namo Phat. Thank you for joining me for our daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The fifth mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I vow to cultivate good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. I will ingest only items that preserve peace, well-being, and joy in my body, in my consciousness, and in the collective body and consciousness of my family and society. I'm determined not to use alcohol or any other items that contain toxins, such as certain TV programs, magazines, books, films, and conversations. I'm aware that to damage my body or my consciousness with these poisons is to betray my ancestors, my parents, my society, and future generations. I will work to transform violence, fear, anger, and confusion in myself and in society by practicing a diet for myself and for society. I understand that a proper diet is crucial for self-transformation and the transformation of society. For our Dharma lesson, we're reading Ajahn Munindo's book, Unexpected Freedom. We're in a chapter called Truly Comfortable, with a section on the point of balance. If we pick up in the wrong way the Buddha's teachings about going against our preferences by thinking that there is some inherent virtue in following our dislikes, then we can hurt ourselves. The Buddha himself, before he was enlightened, followed the path of self-mortification for some years. It made him very unhappy, and he nearly died in the process. In the end, he realized, well, that's not the end of suffering. He had already concluded that gratifying his desires and making his life as comfortable as possible didn't lead to true understanding, because when he had encountered old age, sickness, and death, he had become depressed and miserable. But practicing asceticism and deliberately frustrating his desires hadn't solved the problem either. In the end, he committed himself to settling the matter once and for all, and seated resolutely under the Bodhi tree, made his final determined effort to awaken. Relying on the accumulation of goodness over many lifetimes, he was able to come to the point of seeing for himself that taking any fixed position for or against his likes and dislikes creates suffering. Learning how not to take a position for or against anything is freedom. The Buddha called his discovery the middle way. This middle way, the Buddha said, is born of right understanding regarding the nature of things. But to understand this nature, we need to go against our preferences. In the training of sila, we make the effort to refrain from following heedless tendencies. In formal meditation, we train ourselves in not moving whenever there is an impulse to do so, and we restrain our minds, containing our attention when the mind's tendency is to follow some preference. We want to know, can I choose not to compulsively follow this desire, this preference? In the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the Buddha describes the meditator who, experiencing pleasure, just sits with awareness, simply knowing that there is pleasure without adding anything to it or taking anything away from it. But how do we reach the point of knowing there is pleasure without indulging in it, pursuing it, and working out how we can get more of it? We get to that point through restraining ourselves. When pleasurable sensations arise, our habits are such that we usually just want to have more of them. There is an impulse to seek pleasure based on a preference for pleasurable experience. But if we habitually and blindly follow such a preference, there is an unfortunate consequence. When there is suffering, we are not able to restrain ourselves from contending with the pain. If we indulge in a habitual preference for more pleasure, we will habitually make a problem out of pain. But right understanding arises when we become interested in the reality of our preferences. When pleasure arises, are we able to inhibit the tendency to seek more pleasure? Not because we have any opinion about desire, but because we are interested in the reality of desire. Rather than being driven into gratifying our desires, we then start to feel drawn towards a freedom from blind habit. If we don't understand that Buddhist practice requires us to challenge our preferences, then we will feel that pleasure is either something to follow or something to resist or judge. We won't suspect that there is a middle way between those two options. The teaching of the middle way is an encouragement for us to challenge our preferences, to undermine the agreeable and disagreeable appearances of things. Sometimes we experience real pain and suffering. I don't mean just a little pain in the knees. I mean the sense that the bottom has fallen out of our world. The apparent reality is that this pain is going to last forever. We think, I can't stand this. I can't handle it. And of course, we would prefer it not to be this way. But the Dharma invites us to inhibit the compulsive tendency to be driven into trying to change the situation. Instead, we willingly receive the way this pain expresses itself, just as it is. This is the path of insight practice into the reality of the way things are. If we remain convinced by the apparent nature of things, if we don't have faith in this path of practice, then this pain, disappointment, despair, sadness, grief appears permanent and real. And we will believe that we have to do something to solve it or get out of it. Anything would be better than being with it. But lacking the commitment to stay with pain in awareness, we can't see through the way it appears. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Namo Adita Phat. Thanks so much for joining me today.